There is a moment in Season 2 of The Amazing World of Gumball where reality itself begins to collapse. The sky tears open. Colors bleed into shapes that should not exist. The laws of physics fold in on themselves like wet paper. Buildings stretch into impossible geometries. People transform into objects they were never meant to be. And at the center of all of this, smiling and completely oblivious, is a large pink rabbit in a bathrobe delivering a pizza. The episode is called The Job. It aired on August 7th, 2012, as part of the show's second season on Cartoon Network. And the premise is deceptively simple. Richard Watterson, the Watterson family patriarch, gets a job as a pizza delivery guy. He does not get it through ambition or skill. He accidentally dials a job application hotline while trying to order food. And yet, the moment Richard begins successfully performing labor, the universe starts to unravel. Not metaphorically, literally. Reality cannot sustain a version of Richard Watterson who holds down employment. His family has to race across town to get him fired before the fabric of existence dissolves entirely. Most people remember this episode as one of the funniest in the entire series, and it is. But there is something underneath the comedy that almost nobody talks about. The show is telling you, in the most exaggerated way possible, that Richard Watterson is a force of nature, not a bumbling idiot, not a simple joke. A man whose very relationship with the world is so unusual, so fundamentally different from everyone around him, that when he operates by normal rules, those rules break. That is not stupidity. That is something else entirely. This video is about every time Richard was actually a genius, not book smart, not conventionally intelligent, but genuinely, surprisingly, undeniably brilliant in ways that the show buries under layers of comedy and chaos. Because across 6 seasons and 240 episodes of The Amazing World of Gumball, created by Ben Bocquelet and airing on Cartoon Network from May 3rd, 2011 to June 24th, 2019, there is a pattern hidden in plain sight. Richard Watterson, the laziest man in Elmore, the stay-at-home father who spends his days sleeping on the couch and eating sausages, is smarter than almost anyone gives him credit for. And the proof is everywhere once you know where to look. Welcome to Cartoon. Get comfortable. Let us get into it. To understand why Richard is actually brilliant, you first have to understand what the show tells you he is. And what it tells you, over and over again, is that he is an idiot. A lovable one. A harmless one. But an idiot nonetheless. Richard Buckley Watterson is a 38-year-old anthropomorphic pink rabbit. He is the husband of Nicole, the father of Gumball, Darwin, and Aeneas. He is a stay-at-home dad, though calling him that implies a level of domestic competence that rarely manifests. He sleeps. He eats. He watches television. He plays video games. He avoids chores with a dedication that borders on athletic. In The Painting, a Season 1 episode that aired in 2011, his daughter Aeneas draws a family portrait for school. In it, Nicole is depicted as stressed and furious. Gumball and Darwin are drawn causing mayhem, and Richard is simply asleep. The school counselor is so concerned by the image that the family is called in for a meeting. The solution proposed is straightforward. Nicole should stay home and relax. Richard should go to work. The implication is clear. Richard is the broken part of the Watterson machine. He is the component that does not function. And on the surface, the show confirms this reading constantly. Richard cannot cook without setting something on fire. He cannot drive without causing property damage. He cannot be trusted with basic errands. In The Treasure, a Season 2 episode that aired in 2012, the children discover why the family is perpetually broke. The answer is Richard. He spent the family savings on a star. Not a celestial body he owns or benefits from in any way. A star he purchased through an internet scam. A worthless piece of paper claiming ownership of a dot in the sky. He did this shortly after Gumball was born, while Nicole was still in the hospital. The show frames this as the foundational tragedy of the Watterson family finances. Nicole earns $950 a month at the Rainbow Factory. That is their entire income. Because Richard, in one spectacular moment of gullibility, threw away everything they had. So the question becomes obvious. How can someone this irresponsible, this careless, this demonstrably foolish also be a genius? The answer lives in the gap between what Richard cannot do and what he chooses not to do. And that gap is enormous. Consider The Laziest. It is Season 1, Episode 11. Nicole asks Richard to handle the household chores while she goes shopping. A simple request, a reasonable one. Richard agrees. And then, the moment Nicole leaves, something remarkable happens. Richard does not simply fail to do the chores. He does not try and fall short. Instead, he executes a series of psychological maneuvers so precise, so expertly calibrated, that by the time the episode is over, his children are doing all of his work for him, and his wife believes he has been laboring all day. First, he tricks Gumball and Darwin into taking out the trash by disguising the task as a game. The boys do not realize they have been manipulated until the job is done. When they confront him, Richard reframes the situation. He claims his laziness is a medical condition. The boys challenge him. Richard turns their challenge into a bet. If Gumball and Darwin can find someone lazier than Richard, he will do their chores for a day. But if he proves he is the laziest person in Elmore, the boys have to do his chores for the rest of their lives. The stakes are absurdly lopsided. The boys agree anyway, because they are children, and children trust their father. What follows is a chain of events that proves Richard understands people better than anyone in the family. Gumball and Darwin find Larry, the perpetually overworked cashier who once was apparently even lazier than Richard. They convince Larry to quit his jobs and become lazy again, inadvertently destroying his life in the process. Larry loses his car, his girlfriend, his house. He becomes a cautionary tale. But none of that matters to the outcome of the bet, because Richard is already 3 steps ahead. When he hears Nicole's car pulling into the driveway, Richard does something extraordinary. He concedes the bet. He starts doing the chores, rapidly, visibly, so that when Nicole walks through the door, she sees Richard working and Gumball and Darwin standing idle. Nicole assumes the boys have been lazy all day. She orders them to do all the remaining chores. Richard has won, not the bet. Something better. He has arranged reality so that his wife thinks he is hardworking. His children are punished for being lazy, and he will enjoy the fruits of their labor while sitting comfortably on the couch. And he accomplished all of this without breaking a sweat. Think about what that actually means. Richard read the room. He anticipated Nicole's arrival. He calculated the exact moment to begin working so that the visual impression would override any verbal explanation the boys might offer. He understood that Nicole's perception matters more than the facts. He exploited the power dynamic between parent and child to ensure his own comfort. This is not the behavior of a stupid person. This is the behavior of someone who has mastered a very specific kind of intelligence. Not the kind that solves equations or builds machines. The kind that understands how people work and uses that understanding to get exactly what he wants. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The genius of Richard Watterson is not academic. It is social. It is emotional. It is, above all else, strategic. And nowhere is this more visible than in the way he handles the people who underestimate him. There is a scene in The Remote that most people remember as a goofy family argument. It is the first episode of Season 2, which aired on August 7th, 2012. The setup is domestic and familiar. The Watterson family discovers that every show they want to watch is scheduled for the same time slot. Nicole wants to watch a game show called Win or Do Not Win to try to win a new microwave. Gumball and Darwin want to watch Cutie Pets. Anais wants to watch Daisy the Donkey. And Richard wants to watch his telenovela, La Casa de las Lágrimas, The House of Tears. This is where it gets interesting. Richard speaks fluent Spanish, not broken Spanish, not comedic gibberish. Fluent, conversational Spanish, complete with emotional inflection and proper grammar. He switches into it seamlessly when discussing his show, so naturally that the other characters barely react. The show drops this detail like it is nothing, like a man who cannot remember to feed himself somehow acquired bilingual fluency without anyone noticing. But the real display of intelligence in The Remote is not linguistic. It is tactical, because the episode quickly becomes a battle for the television remote control. And Richard does not just compete, he dominates. While the rest of the family scrambles and fights and schemes in obvious, detectable ways, Richard employs misdirection. He hides the remote. He creates diversions. He reads his family members' strategies and counters them before they execute. The entire episode is built around the premise that this bumbling father is actually the most formidable strategic thinker in the household. Not Nicole, whose competitive rage is legendary. Not Anais, who is supposed to be the genius of the family. Richard, the man everyone assumes is too dim to threaten. This pattern repeats throughout the series. Whenever the stakes are personal, whenever the prize is something Richard actually cares about, his supposed stupidity evaporates. In its place is something sharper, something more calculating, something that suggests the laziness and incompetence are not defects at all. They are camouflage. And the show, to its enormous credit, never tells you this directly. It never has a character turn to the camera and say that Richard is secretly smart. Instead, it shows you. Over and over again, across 6 seasons, it places Richard in situations where his intelligence becomes undeniable, and then it moves on as if nothing happened. It trusts the audience to notice, or it trusts that most of them will not, which makes the discovery that all the more rewarding for those who do. There is a specific kind of intelligence that Richard displays more consistently than any other character in the show. It does not have a formal name, but it could be described as environmental mastery. Richard understands the world he lives in, not the way a scientist understands it, through models and data, the way a native speaker understands grammar, through instinct and immersion. He knows how Elmore works at a level that transcends rational thought. He knows what will happen before it happens, not because he has reasoned it out, but because he has spent so much time doing absolutely nothing that he has absorbed the rhythms of his surroundings like a sponge. The routine makes this explicit. It is Season 4, Episode 11. It aired on October 5th. 2015. Nicole gives Richard a single task. Get mayo. 2 words on a piece of paper. The simplest possible errand. And what follows is one of the most extraordinary episodes in the entire series. Because from Richard's perspective, getting mayo is not a trip to the store. It is an epic quest. The show reimagines his routine errand as a heroic odyssey, complete with mortal enemies, treacherous landscapes, and mythic challenges. Richard mounts his trusty steed, which is really just the family car. He navigates through dangers that the rest of the family never sees and never considers. He encounters Mrs. Jotunheim, who appears to him as an oracle of doom. He battles Mr. Rex in the grocery store, a terrifying combatant who attacks shoppers. He survives it all. He retrieves the mayo. He places it in the refrigerator, and then he falls asleep on the couch before anyone comes home. The family arrives to find everything exactly as they left it. Richard asleep, the mayo in the fridge, no evidence of the ordeal, and that is the point. From the outside, Richard did nothing. He went to the store and came back. But from the inside, from his perspective, he navigated a world of threats and challenges with a competence that nobody in his family would believe if he told them. He fought, he persevered, he completed the mission, and he did it alone, without recognition, without complaint, because that is what he does every single day. The show does not tell you how to feel about this. It does not add a sentimental speech or a moment of family acknowledgement. It just shows you what Richard's world looks like from the inside and trusts you to understand that the man everyone calls lazy is actually fighting battles they cannot see. That is not a joke. That is a deeply compassionate piece of character writing. And it raises a question that the show never answers directly, but keeps circling back to. Is Richard stupid, or has Richard simply decided that the things other people value are not worth his effort because there is a version of Richard Watterson who can speak Spanish, outmaneuver his entire family in a contest of wills, navigate a hostile world alone, save his children from danger, and manipulate any situation to his advantage? And then there is the version of Richard who cannot operate a door. Both of these versions are the same person. The gap between them is not a flaw. It is a choice. The Authority is the episode that comes closest to explaining why. It is Season 2, Episode 19, and it aired on January 29th, 2013. The premise is straightforward. After Richard is hospitalized from an accident, his mother, Granny Jojo, arrives to help. And Granny Jojo's idea of helping is to wrap the entire family in protective gear and forbid them from doing anything remotely dangerous. The episode is a comedy about overprotective parenting, but buried inside it is the answer to the central mystery of Richard Watterson. Because the episode reveals, through flashbacks and present-day behavior, that Granny Jojo raised Richard in near total isolation from risk. She sheltered him so completely that he never developed the ability to take care of himself in conventional ways. She dressed him in safety equipment. She made decisions for him. She treated the entire world as a threat that Richard needed to be protected from. And Richard, because he was a child who trusted his mother, internalized all of it. This is not played for laughs. Or rather, it is played for laughs. But underneath the comedy is something genuinely tragic. Richard Watterson is not stupid because of some inherent limitation. He is stunted because the person who is supposed to teach him how to function in the world instead taught him to be afraid of it. His laziness, his incompetence, his refusal to engage with adult responsibility. These are not personality traits. They are the scars left by a childhood that gave him everything except the tools to grow. But here's the part that matters most. In the climax of The Authority, when the family is trapped in a car, hurtling down an expressway with no one at the controls, when Nicole and Granny Jojo are arguing outside the vehicle, and everyone is screaming in slow motion, Richard acts. He does not freeze. He does not panic. He reaches for the brake and stops the car inches from his wife. One calm, decisive motion that saves every person he loves. The show holds on this moment. It does not rush past it. It lets you see what just happened. The man who was broken by overprotection. The man who never learned to think for himself. The man who everyone in the family treats as another child to manage. Found clarity in the moment when it mattered most. He did not need anyone to tell him what to do. He knew. He always knew. The intelligence was always there. It just needed a reason to surface. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a version of the Richard Watterson story that the show tells you on the surface. And then there is the version that emerges when you pay attention to the details. The surface version is about a funny, lovable, incompetent father. The deeper version is about a man who has been underestimated his entire life and who has, whether consciously or not, built an existence that allows him to be exactly who he is without apology. The Choices is the episode that proves this beyond any reasonable doubt. It is Season 5, Episode 5. It aired on October 6th, 2016, and it has a 9.8 rating on IMDb, making it one of the highest rated episodes of the entire series. The episode belongs to Nicole, technically. It follows her through a series of alternate timelines, showing what her life would have looked like if she had made different decisions at key moments. But the episode is really about Richard, because every timeline that does not include him is a disaster. The backstory is told in fragments, woven through flashbacks that span years. Nicole, as a young girl, is on her way to a karate tournament. She gets lost in a park, and there, stuck inside a log, she finds a young pink rabbit who cannot free himself. She helps him out. And the very first thing Richard says to her, the very first piece of wisdom this supposedly stupid character offers, is that people already like her for who she is, that she does not need to prove anything, that she should just live her life. Think about what that actually means, coming from a child who has been raised by an overprotective mother, who has never been allowed to take risks, who has been treated his entire life as someone incapable of understanding the world. This boy, this sheltered, restricted, supposedly helpless boy, looks at a girl he has just met and immediately identifies the core wound that will define her entire adult life. Nicole's need to prove herself, her desperate, furious drive to be enough. Her inability to simply exist without fighting. Richard sees all of this in their first conversation and offers the exact words she needs to hear. That is not luck. That is not a fluke. That is emotional intelligence of the highest order. Richard Watterson, the man who cannot operate a toaster, can read the soul of a stranger in 30 seconds. And the show frames this as the foundational moment of their relationship. Not a joke, not a gag. The moment that everything else in the Watterson family story grows from. The alternate timelines in The Choices are devastating in their specificity. Nicole explores what would have happened if she had won her karate tournament instead of stopping to help Richard. In that timeline, she becomes a champion, then a warlord, then is overthrown in a revolution. She explores what happens if she marries a wealthy boy named Harold Wilson. In that timeline, she is superficially happy, but spiritually dead, reshaped by cosmetic surgery and social expectations into someone unrecognizable. She explores a dozen other paths, and every single one of them leads to misery, absurdity, or death. And then the episode returns to the real timeline. The one where she helped a strange rabbit out of a log and fell in love with him. The one where they dated through their teenage years. Where her parents disapproved. Where his mother kicked him out. Where they lived together in a tiny apartment next to a train station. The one where she got pregnant with Gumball. Where they had a wedding in a park. Where they moved into a house that needed constant repairs and raised 3 children on $950 a month. The one where nothing was easy and nothing was glamorous. And Richard never became the husband that society says he should have been. And Nicole chooses it. She looks at her chaotic, messy, financially ruined, emotionally exhausting life with Richard Watterson. And she chooses it over every alternative. Not because she has no other options. The episode has just shown her a dozen other options. She chooses it because Richard, in his fumbling, infuriating, impossible way, gives her something no one else can. He lets her be herself. He does not try to fix her. He does not compete with her. He does not resent her strength or fear her rage. He simply loves her completely and without conditions. And that love is the one thing that none of her other possible lives could offer. That is the genius the show is describing. Not the genius of solving puzzles or earning degrees. The genius of knowing what another person needs and giving it to them so naturally that they do not even realize it is happening. Richard Watterson saved Nicole's life. Not once, not in one dramatic moment, every single day, by being exactly the person she needed him to be. The emotional intelligence that Richard displays in the choices is not an isolated incident. It is a thread that runs through the entire series, appearing in moments so brief and so easily overlooked that most viewers walk past them without a second thought. In The Hero, Season 2, Episode 22, Gumball and Darwin are asked by their classmates what makes their father special. The boys struggle to answer. They cannot think of any traditional fatherly accomplishments. Richard does not have a career. He does not have hobbies that impress people. He does not have stories of adventure or achievement. And so, cornered by peer pressure, they start listing the only things they can think of. He sweats without moving. He gains weight. He embarrasses them in public. Their classmates laugh. Richard, who has arrived to pick them up, overhears everything. The show does not cut away from his reaction. It stays on his face. And what you see there is not anger. It is not indignation. It is hurt. Pure, simple, devastating hurt. Richard Watterson, who shrugs off every criticism and laughs at every insult, is wounded to his core by the knowledge that his own children cannot find a single good thing to say about him. What happens next is what separates Richard from every other bumbling father in animated television. He does not sulk. He does not guilt-trip his children. He does not weaponize their shame. Instead, he tries to prove himself. He attempts a series of increasingly dangerous and foolish stunts to demonstrate that he is, in fact, heroic. He fails at all of them, spectacularly, publicly, painfully, and the episode builds toward a moment where Gumball and Darwin realize something that the audience has been shown all along. Richard was never trying to be a hero for himself. He was trying to be one for them. Every embarrassing, dangerous, ridiculous thing he did was because he heard his children say he was not special. And his response was not to argue or defend himself, but to try to become the person they wanted him to be, even though he could not, even though the attempt nearly killed him. Because that is what Richard Watterson does. He fails loudly, publicly, and without dignity, but he fails in the direction of the people he loves. And that willingness to humiliate himself for his children, that refusal to protect his own ego at their expense, that is a kind of wisdom that the show never asks you to admire, but always asks you to witness. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a conversation that the show has been having with its audience since the very first season. It is a conversation about what it means to be a father, and specifically, what it means to be a father who does not fit the mold. Richard Watterson fails every test that society uses to measure paternal success. He does not provide financially. He does not model ambition. He does not teach discipline or responsibility. By every conventional metric, he is the worst father in Elmore, and yet his children love him. His wife chose him over every possible alternative the universe could offer. His family, dysfunctional as it is, holds together through crises that would shatter most households. Something is holding them together, and that something is Richard. The Fridge, Season 2, Episode 4, illustrates this tension with surgical precision. The episode aired in 2012 and centers on Nicole's decision to hang a success chart on the refrigerator, tracking each family member's achievements. The chart reveals what everyone already knows. Nicole has the most accomplishments. Aeneas has strong academic performance. Darwin and Gumball have modest entries. And Richard has nothing. 0 achievements. A blank space where a list of accomplishments should be. Nicole's response is to focus her energy on Gumball, pushing him to become a winner through competition and force of will. She takes the family to a paintball field for what she frames as a bonding exercise, but is really a contest. Gumball must capture a flag. If he wins, the chart comes down. The episode escalates into a paintball war that exposes the darker edges of Nicole's competitive nature and the pressure she places on her children to succeed. Richard's role in this episode is, on the surface, minimal. He participates in the paintball game without much strategic input. He does not lead. He does not inspire. He does not deliver a rousing speech. But pay attention to what he does not do, because that is where his genius lives. Richard does not compete with his children. He does not feel threatened by the chart. He does not measure his worth against his wife's accomplishments. In a household where Nicole's intensity turns everything into a competition, Richard is the one person who simply exists without needing to win. He is not passive because he is incapable. He is passive because he understands instinctively that his family needs at least one person who is not keeping score. That is not stupidity. That is wisdom, the quiet kind. The kind that nobody writes down on a chart or hangs on a refrigerator. The kind that creates space in a household where space is the rarest commodity. Because Nicole is a hurricane. She is powerful and capable and terrifying, and she fills every room she enters with her energy. Gumball and Darwin are chaos incarnate. Aeneas is a 4-year-old prodigy whose intellect outstrips her emotional development. In a family like this, the most valuable thing a person can be is calm, present, undemanding, available, and that is exactly what Richard is. The show reinforces this reading in The Deal, Season 5, Episode 34. When Nicole receives a raise at work, a tiny, almost insulting 3% increase, Richard feels that his contributions to the household are not appreciated. So he goes on strike. He stops doing whatever invisible work he has been doing, the small maintenance tasks, the child management, the general presence that keeps things running. The result is immediate and catastrophic. Within a day, the house is destroyed. The walls are covered in drawings. The lights do not work. The children have literally reverted to feral creatures, wild-eyed and destructive, like something out of a horror film. Nicole comes home to find the household in ruins, unable to function without the very person she had been dismissing. The episode makes its point with characteristic bluntness. Richard Watterson contributes more to his family than anyone, including Richard himself, gives him credit for. His contribution is not measurable in dollars or achievements. It is the act of being there, of absorbing chaos, of providing the steady, unshakable center that allows everyone else to orbit freely. When you remove that center, everything flies apart. And here's the detail that makes this episode a masterclass in hidden character depth. When the children become feral monsters in Richard's absence, it is Richard's unconventional parenting that brings them back. Nicole, the competent parent, the one with the achievements on the chart, cannot handle them. She is overwhelmed. It is Richard, with his absurd, illogical, seemingly random approach to childcare, who calms them down. He lets only one of the 3 children catapult the neighbor over the house, which sounds insane, but works because it exhausts their destructive energy and puts them to sleep. Nicole is amazed. She cannot explain how it worked. Richard cannot either, but it did, because Richard understands his children not through logic or theory, but through presence. He has spent so much time with them, so much unstructured, unproductive, supposedly wasted time, that he knows their rhythms the way a musician knows a song. He does not think about what to do. He just does it. And it works. That is genius. Not the kind that wins awards or fills resumes. The kind that keeps a family together. The relationship between Richard and his own father provides the darkest and most revealing window into who Richard really is. Frankie Watterson is first mentioned in The Man, the 24th episode of Season 3, which also holds the distinction of being the 100th episode overall. He is a con man, a small-time grifter who looks like a rat and behaves like one too. He abandoned Richard when Richard was still a child, claiming he was going out to buy milk and simply never coming back. Richard, in an act of psychological self-preservation that the show treats as comedy but is actually heartbreaking, convinced himself for decades that his father really was buying milk. That any day now, Frankie would walk through the door with a carton in his hand and everything would be fine. This is not stupidity. This is a coping mechanism so powerful and so deeply embedded that it has shaped Richard's entire personality. The man who cannot remember simple tasks, who seems to live in a world of cheerful obliviousness, chose obliviousness over the unbearable truth that his father did not love him enough to stay. Frankie physically appears for the first time in The Signature, Season 4, Episode 5, which aired in 2015. The episode is about Granny JoJo's plans to marry Louis, and Richard's panicked attempt to stop the wedding by legally adopting Louis as a child. The family tree becomes so tangled that the children decide to track down Frankie, hoping he can untangle things. When they find him, he is exactly what you would expect. A sleazy, smooth-talking grifter who immediately tries to con the Wattersons out of their house. But something happens when Frankie succeeds. He has the documents. He has the legal authority to take the Watterson home. And then he looks at Richard, and Richard looks at him, and the show gives you a flashback. Richard as a small child, waving goodbye to his father with a smile, believing with absolute certainty that his dad would return with the milk. That smile, that innocent, trusting, heartbreaking smile. Frankie cannot do it. He looks at that memory, at the son he abandoned, at the trust he betrayed, and he gives the house back. He signs the papers that restore the Watterson family's ownership. He chooses, for perhaps the first time in his life, to do the right thing. And the reason he does it is Richard. Not Richard's arguments, not Richard's threats. Richard's face, the same open, trusting, impossibly sincere face that has been mistaken for stupidity for 6 seasons. Richard Watterson's emotional transparency, the quality that makes him seem simple, is actually his most powerful trait. He does not hide what he feels. He does not perform. He does not calculate. He simply feels, openly and completely. And that openness disarms people. It disarmed Nicole in the park when they were children. It disarms Frankie in The Signature. It disarms his own children in The Hero. Time after time, Richard's willingness to be vulnerable, to be hurt, to be seen without any armor accomplishes what cleverness and strength cannot. That is a kind of genius that most people never develop. Not because they are not smart enough, but because they are too afraid. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Outside, Season 5, Episode 14, picks up the Frankie storyline and deepens it in ways that further illuminate Richard's character. The Wattersons invite Frankie to their home, and upon discovering he has been absent because he was avoiding prison, they transform the house into a makeshift correctional facility to make him feel comfortable. Nicole becomes a guard, Aeneas becomes the warden, Gumball, Darwin, and Richard become inmates. The comedy is broad and physical, but underneath it is a portrait of a son who will reshape his entire world to accommodate his father, even a father who abandoned him, even a father who tried to steal his house. And then, the father comes along in Season 6, Episode 6. The children encourage Richard to try to reconnect with Frankie through bonding activities. Father and son play catch. They spend time together. They try to build a relationship from scratch. And Richard, who has every reason to be resentful, who has every justification for anger, chooses patience instead. This is not easy for him. The episode makes that clear. Frankie cannot stop being a criminal. Every gift he gives Richard is stolen. Every activity they share is tainted by Frankie's inability to function outside the framework of deception and theft. Richard starts to lose his patience. He becomes frustrated. He cries. He tells his children that there is too much time to catch up, that the gap between him and his father is too wide to bridge. But he does not give up. He does not walk away. He does not become his father. And at the end of the episode, something shifts. Frankie, confronted by the reality of his son's pain and his son's refusal to abandon him the way Frankie abandoned Richard, chooses to try. Not perfectly, not completely. But the door opens a crack, and Richard is the one who kept knocking on it long after anyone else would have stopped. Think about what that requires. Not intelligence in the conventional sense. Something harder. The ability to keep loving someone who has given you every reason to stop. The capacity to absorb disappointment after disappointment without becoming bitter. The strength to remain open when closing off would be so much easier. Richard Watterson, the man who cannot hold a job or operate a stove, possesses an emotional resilience that borders on superhuman. The show never draws a direct line between Richard's abandonment by Frankie and his dedication to his own children. It does not need to. The evidence is in every episode. Richard Watterson wakes up every morning in a house he cannot afford, with a wife who works herself to exhaustion, and 3 children who regularly put themselves in mortal danger, and he stays. He does not leave. He does not check out emotionally. He does not become his father. Every day that Richard Watterson is present in the lives of his children is a quiet act of defiance against the pattern that was set for him. And he does it so naturally, so effortlessly, that nobody, including Richard himself, recognizes it as remarkable. But it is. It is the most remarkable thing about him. The show explores Richard's relationship with fear in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. Richard is afraid of many things. He is afraid of the dark in several episodes. He is afraid of Granny JoJo's driving. He is afraid of Nicole's temper. He is afraid of the world outside his house. These fears are played for comedy, and they are funny, but they also form a coherent picture of a man who was raised to be afraid and has spent his adult life negotiating with that fear in real time. The Vacation, Season 3, Episode 10, places the entire Watterson family in a survival situation. Their car breaks down in the desert. Nicole has just told a ghost story about a family in their exact situation being eaten by a toothless hermit. The children panic. Nicole tries to maintain control, and Richard, the one person everyone expects to be useless, surprises them. He does not lead with authority. He does not suddenly become competent in the traditional sense, but he keeps moving. When the family separates in their panic, Richard navigates the situation with a physical persistence that compensates for his lack of rational planning. He falls into mud pits. He takes hits. He endures. And somehow, through a combination of luck, stubbornness, and an instinctive refusal to let his family come to harm, everyone survives. This is a pattern that repeats throughout the series. In moments of genuine danger, Richard does not become smart. He becomes unstoppable. The intelligence is not in his planning. It is in his persistence. He absorbs punishment that would break other characters, and he keeps going. Not because he is brave. He is explicitly not brave. He is terrified almost all of the time, but his love for his family overrides his fear every single time, without exception. In The Return, the first episode of season 4, Richard wakes up to discover that his children are missing. They are trapped in a shipping crate that was supposed to be delivered to the school. Nicole does not know. If she finds out the children are gone, the consequences for Richard will be catastrophic. He has to get them to school before Nicole realizes anything has happened. What follows is a sequence of escalating chaos that would be slapstick in any other show, but in this context becomes something else. Richard does not sit paralyzed by indecision. He acts immediately, frantically. He tries to pull the crate with the family car. When that fails, he steals a truck. When direct roads fail, he drives through buildings, through walls, through obstacles that any reasonable person would consider impassable. He arrives at the school just as Nicole pulls up, the children tumbling out of the crate covered in packing materials, and Nicole asks them how their first day back was, as if nothing happened. The episode never acknowledges what Richard just did. Nobody congratulates him. Nobody even knows. Richard saved his children from discovery and potential disaster through an act of sheer, desperate, logistically insane resourcefulness. And then the show moves on. This is how the show handles Richard's competence. It appears in emergencies, in moments of desperation, in situations where the usual rules do not apply, and then it disappears, receding behind the comfortable mask of laziness and confusion that Richard wears for the rest of the time. The genius is intermittent, explosive, triggered by love and necessity rather than ambition or curiosity. And because it does not look the way genius is supposed to look, because it does not come with glasses and textbooks and articulate speeches, everyone, including the audience, dismisses it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Job, the episode that opened this video, deserves deeper examination because it is the most philosophically interesting episode in the entire series when viewed through the lens of Richard's intelligence. Season 2, Episode 8. The premise, once you strip away the comedy, is terrifying. Richard Watterson is so fundamentally disconnected from the conventional order of things that his participation in normal economic activity destabilizes reality itself. He gets the job by accident. He was trying to order pizza. He dialed a job application hotline instead. This is classic Richard. The man cannot perform a simple transaction without creating chaos. But notice what happens once he has the job. He does not fail at it. He succeeds. He delivers the pizzas. He performs the labor. He does it competently and with genuine enthusiasm. And that is what breaks the universe. The reality warping effects are escalating and specific. As Richard makes his deliveries, colors bleed into wrong objects. People transform. Physics stops functioning. The sky splits open. These are not random glitches. They are the universe reacting to a paradox. Richard Watterson with a job is a contradiction so fundamental that the fabric of existence cannot contain it. Not because he is incapable of working, but because the universe itself has been built around his not working. His laziness is not a bug. It is a feature, a load-bearing wall in the architecture of reality. There is a reading of this episode that is simply absurdist comedy. A lazy guy gets a job and the world ends. Funny. Moving on. But there is another reading that is far more interesting. The universe of the amazing world of Gumball recognizes Richard Watterson as something essential. His inactivity is not waste. It is balance. He is the still point around which the chaos of Elmore revolves. When he starts moving, when he starts participating in the normal flow of commerce and productivity, the balance tips. Everything falls apart. Consider what that means for every other episode. Every time someone calls Richard lazy, every time Nicole sighs at his inactivity, every time the children roll their eyes at his refusal to contribute, they are looking at the one person in Elmore whose very nature keeps the world from ending, and they are seeing a failure. The show does not spell this out. It does not need to. The evidence is the episode itself. Richard Watterson is not lazy. He is essential. The universe proved it, and the ending of the job reinforces this reading in a detail that most people overlook. After the family succeeds in getting Richard fired, after reality restores itself, and a rainbow appears over Elmore, signifying that everything is at peace, Richard turns to his family and says, with genuine excitement, that he will get another job. Lightning immediately strikes his finger in clear weather. The universe is warning him, stay still. Do not disturb the balance. You are exactly where you need to be. Richard does not understand the warning. He never does, but the universe does. The universe knows what Richard is, even if Richard does not. And what he is, according to the internal logic of the show, is indispensable. The prank episodes reveal another dimension of Richard's intelligence that is easy to miss because it is wrapped in juvenile behavior. The prank, Season 1, Episode 14, starts with Richard playing a harmless trick on Gumball at breakfast. He passes salt instead of sugar. Gumball pours it on his cereal, takes a bite, and gags. Richard laughs. It is a simple, childish prank, the kind of thing a father does when he has nothing better to occupy his time. But what follows is instructive. Gumball retaliates. He squeezes ketchup on Richard, and Richard's response is immediate and disproportionate. He cries. He runs away. He cannot take what he dishes out. This seems like pure comedy, and it is, but it also reveals something about how Richard processes the world. He gives pranks because they are a form of connection, a way to engage with his children that does not require competence or knowledge, or any of the qualities he lacks. When the prank is returned, it hurts him not because of the ketchup, but because the playful contract has been violated. He was playing. They are attacking. The distinction is real to him, even if it seems absurd to everyone else. This emotional granularity, this ability to feel the difference between play and aggression with crystal clarity, is not a sign of stupidity. It is a sign of heightened emotional sensitivity. Richard feels everything, every slight, every joke, every act of love, and every act of cruelty registers at maximum volume. He has no emotional armor, no cynical filters, no protective irony. He experiences the world the way a child does, with complete openness. And that openness is both his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. In The Tag, Season 2, Episode 26, Richard and his neighbor, Mr. Robinson escalate a prank war until both men are under house arrest. The episode plays like a farce, with both adults behaving like children. But watch Richard's pranks closely. They are creative. They are elaborate. They require planning, timing, and a working knowledge of his victim's habits and vulnerabilities. The man who cannot be trusted to buy groceries can design and execute a multi-stage prank with the precision of a military operation. This disparity between Richard's life competence and his prank competence tells you something important. Richard is not incapable of complex thinking. He is incapable of caring about complex thinking when the subject does not interest him. When something engages him, when something activates his attention, he can be remarkably sophisticated. His intelligence is not absent. It is selective. It activates only when the motivation is strong enough to overcome the inertia of his laziness. And the things that motivate Richard are simple: food, fun, family. Everything else is noise. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Lie, Season 3, Episode 26, offers one of the most charming examples of Richard's creative intelligence. It is January in Elmore. The holiday season is over. Everyone is depressed. Gumball and Aeneas decide to invent a new holiday to cheer people up. They call it Tag. They make up rules, traditions, and a mascot. And then they need food for the celebration. Richard's contribution is the Sluzzleverse, a creation made from various processed meats, assembled with a theatrical flair that the show likens to a magical girl transformation sequence. It is absurd. It is disgusting. It is also one of the most purely creative acts that any character in the series performs. Richard takes random ingredients and combines them into something new. Not something good, necessarily, but something original. Something that did not exist before he made it. And the show plays this moment with genuine warmth. The family eats together. They watch a television special. They bond. They put the children to bed. For one night in the middle of January, the Wattersons are happy, not because of money or achievement or success, because Richard made a weird sausage, and the family sat down together and pretended it was a tradition. There is something almost philosophical about Richard's relationship with creativity. He does not create things that are good by conventional standards. His art is terrible. His cooking is dangerous. His ideas are frequently catastrophic, but he creates constantly. He generates ideas and proposals and inventions with a fertility that none of the other characters can match. Most of them are bad. Some of them are disasters. But the impulse itself, the relentless drive to imagine and build and propose, is a form of intelligence that the show celebrates even as it mocks the results. The Master, Season 6, Episode 32, takes this creative impulse and gives it the spotlight. The Wattersons are fighting, not about anything specific, just the general friction that builds up in a family of 5 who spend too much time together. Richard's solution is to make them play a tabletop role-playing game. He becomes the game master. He assigns characters. Nicole is a barbarian named Testosterona. Aeneas is a wizard named Norovirus. Darwin is an elf named Frumpet. Gumball is a dwarf warrior named Mario Kebab. The names alone reveal a playful intelligence that most people would not associate with Richard. They are funny. They are specific. They are tailored to each family member's personality in ways that show he has been paying attention. Nicole gets the warrior because she is the family's fighter. Aeneas gets the wizard because she is the smart one. Darwin gets the elf because he is gentle and earnest. Gumball gets the dwarf because he is small and combative. Richard has created a game that is really a mirror, reflecting each family member back at themselves through the lens of fantasy. And the game works. It does not solve the family's problems immediately, because that is not how problems work. But it creates a space where the Wattersons can interact without the usual friction. They are not themselves. They are characters. And the distance that fantasy provides allows them to say things and do things that would be impossible in their real lives. Richard, who has never demonstrated any academic or intellectual skill, has intuitively grasped something that therapists study for years. That narrative distance can enable emotional honesty, that playing a role can be more authentic than being yourself. He does not know that he knows this. That is important. Richard does not have a theory about what he is doing. He is not applying a framework. He is just doing what feels right. And what feels right happens to be psychologically sophisticated. This is the essence of Richard's genius. It is instinctive rather than deliberate, intuitive rather than analytical. It operates below the level of conscious thought, which is why it coexists so comfortably with his apparent stupidity. Richard does not think his way to wisdom. He feels his way there. The question of nature versus nurture runs through every Richard-centric episode in ways that the show handles with remarkable sophistication. The authority establishes that Richard's lack of conventional intelligence is the result of Granny JoJo's overprotective parenting. But is that the whole story? The Choices shows a young Richard who is already wise beyond his years, dispensing emotional insight to a stranger in a park before Granny JoJo's influence could have fully shaped him. The Job suggests that Richard's nature is so fundamentally unusual that the laws of the universe bend around it. Which version is true? The answer, the show suggests, is all of them. Richard is a man who was born with extraordinary emotional sensitivity and intuitive understanding. A man who was then raised in an environment that suppressed every conventional expression of those gifts, who grew up believing he was stupid because the only kind of intelligence his mother acknowledged was the kind that kept you safe, who built a life that looked like failure to everyone watching, but felt from the inside like the only life that made sense. And here's the crucial part. The thing that makes Richard a genius, rather than just a victim of bad parenting. He is happy, not always, not perfectly, but fundamentally, at his core, Richard Watterson is a contented man. He loves his wife. He loves his children. He loves sausages and television and sleeping on the couch. He has arranged his life around the things that matter to him and discarded everything that does not. He has no ambition because he has no desires that are unmet. He has no drive because he is already where he wants to be. Most people spend their entire lives trying to achieve what Richard has. A family that loves him. A home where he belongs. A partner who chose him over every other option the universe could offer. He got there not through hustle and ambition and competitive excellence. He got there by being kind, by being present, by being open, by being himself so completely and unapologetically that the right people gravitated toward him and the wrong ones left him alone. That is not a failure story. That is a success story, told in a language most people have forgotten how to read. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is an episode that encapsulates everything this video has been building toward. The Fuss, Season 5, Episode 13. The plot is deceptively simple. Richard and the kids forget Nicole's special day. Not her birthday, not their anniversary. A day that is somehow important. But neither Richard nor the children can figure out exactly which day it is. The episode becomes a scramble to determine what they forgot and make it right before Nicole's disappointment turns into fury. The comedy comes from the investigation. Richard and the children try to figure out the occasion through clues and deduction, failing hilariously at every turn. But the emotional core of the episode is something quieter. When Richard finally realizes how badly he has hurt Nicole by forgetting, his response is not to make excuses. It is not to deflect blame. It is to go directly to a tattoo parlor and get the date permanently written on his body. Think about that for a second. Not a note on the fridge, not a reminder on his phone, a permanent mark on his flesh. Richard Watterson's solution to forgetting something important is to carve the memory into himself so that it can never be lost again. That is excessive. That is ridiculous. That is also one of the most sincere expressions of devotion that the show has ever produced. And there is a twist. Anais discovers that the calendar was hung upside down. The dates were reversed. Nicole got the occasion wrong. She was not right to be angry. The whole crisis was based on a misunderstanding. But by the time Anais figures this out, Richard is already at the tattoo parlor. He is already enduring the pain. He is already converting his perceived failure into permanent physical proof that he cares. The episode does not present this as stupid. It presents it as Richard, a man whose first instinct, when he believes he has failed someone he loves, is not to explain or justify, but to punish himself. To absorb the pain so that Nicole does not have to carry the disappointment. To make the sacrifice physical and permanent, because anything less would not match the depth of his commitment. That is not the behavior of someone who does not understand. That is the behavior of someone who understands too well. Richard knows that Nicole works herself to the bone for a family that frequently takes her for granted. He knows that she deserves more than he gives her. He knows that his forgetfulness, his laziness, his inability to be the husband she might have had in another life causes her pain. And his response to that knowledge is not to change, because he cannot change, but to suffer visibly so that she knows he knows. There is an entire school of philosophy built around the idea that the highest form of love is the willingness to suffer for another person. Richard Watterson gets a tattoo on his backside because he forgot an anniversary that was not actually the anniversary. That is simultaneously the most ridiculous and the most profound thing the show has ever done. The Treasure, Season 2, Episode 10, revisits the question of Richard's intelligence from an angle that should be devastating, but somehow is not. The children discover that the family is poor. They investigate. They find out that Richard spent their savings on a star through an internet scam. A worthless star. A dot in the sky that cost them everything. This is, by any rational measure, the single dumbest thing any character in the show has ever done. Richard bankrupted his family for a piece of paper. He fell for a scam that any minimally intelligent person would have recognized. He did it while his wife was in the hospital, recovering from giving birth to their first child. It is inexcusable. It is unforgivable. It is proof positive that Richard Watterson is, in fact, an idiot. And then the show does something remarkable. The family confronts Richard. They are angry. They are hurt. They demand an explanation. And Richard's defense is not that it was a good investment. Not that he was tricked. Not that he did not know what he was doing. His defense, stated simply and without irony, is that he wanted to give his family a star. Not money, not financial security. A star. Something beautiful. Something permanent. Something that would hang in the sky forever, belonging to them. A light that nothing could extinguish. He was a new father. He was holding his first child, and he wanted to give that child everything. Not the practical everything, not a college fund or a retirement account, the romantic everything. A star with their name on it. A piece of the universe that was theirs. The family forgives him, not because the logic makes sense. It does not. But because the motivation underneath the stupidity is so pure, so transparently loving, that anger cannot survive it. They go outside together and look up at their star. It is worthless. It is imaginary, and it is theirs. This moment captures the fundamental paradox of Richard Watterson. His worst decisions and his best qualities come from the same place. His generosity is inseparable from his foolishness. His love is inseparable from his incompetence. You cannot have the man who buys you a star without also having the man who bankrupts your family. The genius and the idiocy are not separate features. They are the same feature, viewed from different angles. And the show asks you, in this quiet moment under the stars, whether you would trade one for the other, whether you would prefer a practical husband who never bankrupts you, but also never thinks to give you the sky. Nicole's answer, in this episode and in every episode, is no. She would not trade, not for anything. There is a conversation happening in this episode between the show and its audience that goes beyond the characters on screen. The amazing world of Gumball is asking you to reconsider how you value the people in your life. Not the people who impress you, not the people who provide for you, not the people whose accomplishments you can list and whose contributions you can measure. The people who are simply there, the people who show up, the people whose love is so constant and so quiet that it becomes invisible, like air, like gravity, like the ground beneath your feet. You do not notice them until they are gone. And when they are gone, you realize that everything you thought was holding you up was actually them. Richard Watterson bought a worthless star. That star hangs in the sky above the Watterson house in dozens of episodes across the entire run of the series. It is a background detail that most viewers never notice, but it is there every night in the corner of the frame, a tiny, insignificant point of light that represents the most foolish and the most beautiful thing Richard Watterson ever did. He gave his family the sky. The fact that it was a scam does not change what it was. A gesture so absurdly romantic, so spectacularly impractical, so completely divorced from anything a sensible person would do, that it transcends its own stupidity and becomes something else. Something that Nicole, looking up at it with her children beside her, understands perfectly, even if she could never explain it to anyone who was not there. The star is a metaphor for Richard himself. Dismissed by everyone who measures value in practical terms, ignored by everyone who only sees what a thing costs, but present, persistent, hanging in the sky above the people who love it, beautiful for reasons that have nothing to do with utility, and everything to do with the fact that someone cared enough to put it there. The Diet, Season 5, Episode 24, provides one of the show's sharpest commentaries on what happens when you try to fix Richard Watterson. Gumball and Darwin discover that their father's diet is not failing because he lacks willpower. It is failing because he is simultaneously following 10 different diets and eating a full meal for each one. This is quintessential Richard, not unable to diet, over-dieting, applying too much enthusiasm rather than too little. The boys intervene. They force Richard to exercise by making him work for his junk food, then switch the junk food for healthy alternatives. It works. Richard loses weight. He becomes fit, muscular, conventionally attractive, and the moment he does, he becomes insufferable, vain, narcissistic, obsessed with his appearance. The warm, bumbling, endlessly patient father is replaced by a preening, self-absorbed stranger who has no interest in his family's emotional needs. The episode is a comedy, but its thesis is razor sharp. The qualities that make Richard a good father are inextricable from the qualities that make him unhealthy. His weight is the physical manifestation of a life devoted to comfort and pleasure rather than ambition and self-improvement. And when you strip that away, when you give him the body that society says he should want, you also strip away the person his family actually needs. Richard's genius, the episode suggests, includes the instinctive wisdom to resist self-improvement. Not because improvement is bad, but because the specific improvements that the world wants Richard to make would require him to become someone else. Someone more productive, someone thinner, someone more respectable, someone who is not Richard. And Richard, whether he understands it consciously or not, has chosen to remain himself. That choice costs him the respect of strangers and the approval of conventional society. But it preserves the one thing he cares about, his ability to be present, fully and without reservation, for the people he loves. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show's final seasons deepen Richard's character in ways that reward careful attention. As the series matures from broad comedy into something stranger and more emotionally complex, Richard's moments of unexpected brilliance become more frequent and more layered. The Copycats, Season 5, Episode 11, confronts the Wattersons with doppelgangers. A family of imitators, Chi-Chi and Ribbit and their parents, are copying everything the Wattersons do and profiting from it online. The episode is a celebrated piece of meta-commentary, a direct response to a real Chinese animated show called Miracle Star that plagiarized the amazing world of Gumball. But within the episode, Richard's response to being copied is instructive. He does not get angry. He does not feel violated. He watches the copycat family perform his routine, his habits, his daily life, and he is flattered. He sees imitation not as theft, but as validation. Someone out there thinks his life is worth copying. This reaction is played for comedy, but consider what it reveals. Richard has no ego investment in being unique. He does not need to be the only version of himself. He does not require originality as a condition of his self-worth. He simply exists, and if someone else wants to exist the same way, that is fine with him. This is an almost Buddhist form of non-attachment. Richard does not cling to his identity as property. He does not treat his personality as intellectual capital. He is, quite possibly, the only character in the show who would not be threatened by the discovery that he is not special. Because Richard's sense of self does not depend on being special. It depends on being comfortable. And comfort, unlike specialness, cannot be taken away by imitation. The Pizza, Season 3, Episode 25, places Richard in the center of an apocalypse and reveals that his survival instincts, while bizarre, are remarkably effective. The episode begins when Larry, the man who works every service job in Elmore, quits after the Wattersons treat him badly. Without Larry, the entire economy collapses. Services stop. Infrastructure fails. Elmore descends into post-apocalyptic chaos. Richard's response to the apocalypse is to steal a canoe. He insists the family sleep in it. He is saving the mattress as a raft in case of flooding. This seems absurd. It is absurd, but it is also a form of planning. Bad planning, certainly, but planning nonetheless. Richard is thinking ahead. He is anticipating scenarios. He is making provisions. They are the wrong provisions, but they come from the same cognitive process that produces good provisions in more capable people. The episode also features a scene where Richard pretends to start a car and drives it using only pantomime. The family, caught up in the chaos, follows along as if the car were real. This is leadership. Delusional leadership, admittedly. But in a crisis where everyone else has given up, Richard's ability to project confidence, even confidence based on complete fantasy, is the thing that keeps the family moving forward. He is too disconnected from reality to be paralyzed by it. His obliviousness, in this context, functions as courage, and there is a deeper layer still. The apocalypse in the Pizza is caused by a failure of appreciation. The Wattersons took Larry for granted. They treated him badly. They did not tip him. And when he left, everything fell apart. The episode is about the invisible labor that sustains a community, and by extension, about the invisible labor that sustains a family. Richard Watterson, whose contributions are invisible and untipped, and taken for granted by everyone around him, is the Larry of the Watterson household. When he stops, as the deal proves, everything falls apart. The Bus, Season 4, Episode 30, reveals Richard as an unexpectedly effective actor and schemer. The setup is that Rocky tells the school children they can skip class, but it is a trap. The adults of Elmore, including Richard, Principal Brown, Harold, and Dexter, have staged an elaborate lesson about the consequences of truancy. They hijack the school bus and create a mock criminal scenario to scare the children straight. Richard's performance in this scheme is convincing. He plays his role without breaking character. He maintains the fiction under pressure. He participates in a coordinated deception that requires timing, improvisation, and the ability to read the children's reactions in real time. This is the same man who cannot keep a secret from Nicole for more than 30 seconds. But when the role calls for it, when the purpose is to teach his children something important, Richard becomes a capable and committed actor. This selectivity is the key to understanding everything about Richard Watterson. He can do far more than anyone thinks he can. He simply will not do it unless the motivation aligns with his values. He is not limited by ability. He is limited by interest, and his interests are narrow. Family, food, fun, that is it. Everything else, the entire vast machinery of adult responsibility and social expectation, can wait. The painting, the early Season 1 episode, reveals a detail that is easy to miss in the chaos of the plot. When Richard is sent to get a job, he has a daydream in the lobby. In the daydream, he is promoted. He receives the key to the executive washroom. He is successful. He is valued. He is everything that the real world says he should be. And then he wakes up and walks into a glass door. The daydream is not just comedy. It is evidence that Richard can imagine success. He can picture himself in a world where he achieves conventional goals. The image exists inside him. He is not so broken that he cannot conceive of it. He simply does not pursue it. And the show, by placing his daydream directly before his failure, suggests that the failure is not an inability to succeed, but a refusal to trade the life he has for the life society wants him to have. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a category of Richard's intelligence that deserves its own extended discussion, and it is the category that most clearly separates him from the standard animated father archetype. Richard Watterson possesses an extraordinary capacity for physical resilience and spatial awareness that the show treats as comedy, but which, upon examination, constitutes a genuine superpower. Consider what Richard endures across 6 seasons. He is struck by vehicles. He falls from heights that would kill a normal person. He is electrocuted, burned, frozen, compressed, stretched, and subjected to forces that defy the laws of physics. In The Prank, Season 1, Episode 14, he breaks through walls during the escalating prank war with his sons. He fractures ribs and keeps going. In The Limit, Season 2, Episode 30, which aired on August 28, 2013, he navigates a supermarket that has become a war zone after Nicole reaches her breaking point. Her monstrous transformation, punching the electricity control panel and plunging the store into darkness. Richard survives this. He survives everything, not through skill or agility, but through a kind of physical stubbornness that mirrors his emotional stubbornness. His body refuses to quit in the same way his heart refuses to quit on the people he loves. The show never frames this as toughness. That word implies awareness of danger and a conscious choice to face it. Richard is rarely aware of the danger he is in. He walks into catastrophe with the same cheerful obliviousness he brings to everything else. But the result is the same. He endures. He absorbs punishment. He keeps moving. And in a family where Nicole is the fighter and the children are the chaos agents, Richard is the person who takes the hits that nobody else can. He is the family's damaged sponge, absorbing the collateral consequences of living in a world as volatile as Elmore without complaint, and, more remarkably, without lasting resentment. In The Vacation, when the family car breaks down in the desert and Nicole's ghost story begins to feel uncomfortably real, Richard does not provide leadership in any conventional sense. He does not take charge. He does not formulate a plan, but he stays with the group. When the family splits up in their panic, Richard is the one who keeps trying to reunite them. He falls into mud. He gets attacked. He stumbles through the dark. And through all of it, his primary concern is not his own survival, but making sure everyone else is accounted for. The show plays this as slapstick, and it works as slapstick. But underneath the physical comedy is a portrait of a man who will walk through anything to get back to his family. This physical dimension of Richard's genius connects to something larger about how the show constructs its world. Elmore is a dangerous place. The town is populated by sentient objects, supernatural entities, and people whose emotional states can alter physical reality. The school is a constant source of peril. The streets are unpredictable. Even the house is unreliable. In this environment, simple survival requires a kind of adaptability that the show rarely acknowledges, because its characters have been living with it their entire lives. Richard has adapted better than almost anyone. He has lived in Elmore for his entire adult life without being destroyed by it. He has raised 3 children to near adulthood in a world where a trip to the grocery store can become a life-threatening ordeal. He has done this without Nicole's martial arts expertise, without Anais's intellect, without Gumball's luck, without Darwin's optimism. He has done it with nothing but his presence and his stubbornness and his bizarre, inarticulate instinct for knowing when something is wrong. The Wand, Season 1, Episode 29, reveals another facet of Richard's relationship with the world around him. A plastic toy wand falls out of a cereal box, and Richard immediately believes it is magical. He wishes on it. He makes his children perform humiliating tasks under the belief that the wand is controlling them. Gumball and Darwin, wanting to make their father happy, play along. They pretend the wand works. They perform the wand's supposed commands. They maintain the fiction because they can see how much joy it brings Richard. On the surface, this is another episode about Richard's gullibility. He believes a cereal toy is magic. Classic Richard. But look deeper. Look at what happens when the truth is finally revealed. When Gumball tells Richard the wand is fake, Richard does not react with the anger or denial that the episode has been building toward. Instead, he processes, he thinks, and then he arrives at an understanding that the show frames as the emotional climax. He realizes that his children did humiliating things for him, not because of magic, because they love him enough to make magic real. They faked it so he could have the experience of believing. They sacrificed their dignity to preserve his joy. And Richard's response is to hug them, not because he understands the physics of plastic wands or the impossibility of magic, but because he understands, with absolute clarity, what his children just did for him and what it means. He reads the emotional content of the situation perfectly. He identifies the love behind the deception and responds to it instead of to the deception itself. That requires a kind of emotional processing that many real adult humans never achieve. The ability to see past the surface of what happened and identify why it happened. The ability to forgive the lie because you understand the love that motivated it. Richard's relationship with the truth is complicated in ways that the show uses to generate comedy, but that also reveal genuine psychological depth. He lies frequently. He lies to avoid chores. He lies to avoid Nicole's anger. He lies to maintain pleasant fantasies about himself and his life. His belief that Frankie was buying milk for 42 years is the most extreme example. But there are dozens of smaller ones scattered throughout the series. But here is the crucial observation. Richard's lies are never malicious. He never lies to hurt someone. He never lies for personal gain at another person's expense. He lies to preserve comfort. His own comfort, certainly, but also the comfort of the people around him. He lies because the truth is often painful, and he does not see the point of pain when a pleasant fiction is available. This is not wisdom in the traditional sense. It is often counterproductive. Richard's avoidance of unpleasant truths creates problems that compound over time, as the treasure demonstrates. But it is also a philosophical position, whether Richard knows it or not. He values experience over accuracy. He values feeling over fact. He would rather live in a beautiful lie than an ugly truth. And while that creates practical problems, it also creates a home where joy is the default setting, and where negativity has to fight its way in. Nicole provides the harsh truths. Aeneas provides the logical analysis. Gumball and Darwin provide the chaotic energy. And Richard provides something none of them can. He provides the belief that things are going to be fine. Not because evidence supports this belief. Evidence rarely does. But because someone in the family has to believe it, and if no one else will, Richard will. His optimism is not rational. It is structural. It is the foundation the family stands on. And without it, as the deal proves, with devastating clarity, the whole structure collapses. The limit deserves closer examination for what it reveals about the power dynamics within the Watterson household, and Richard's surprisingly sophisticated navigation of them. The episode takes place in a supermarket. The children want candy. Nicole says no. The children persist. Nicole continues to say no. The tension builds. And through all of this, Richard is doing something that nobody, including Richard, appears to notice. He is absorbing Nicole's escalating anger by being the bigger target. When Richard shoplifts a candy bar and eats it in the store, setting off an alarm, he is not being stupid. Or rather, he is being stupid, but his stupidity serves a function. It redirects Nicole's fury from the children to him. He becomes the focus of her frustration. He becomes the person she has to manage, the person she has to lecture, the person she has to drag back into line. And while she is managing him, she is not pushing the children. He is, in effect, a lightning rod, drawing the electrical charge of Nicole's temper away from the smaller, more vulnerable members of the family and into himself, where it dissipates harmlessly because Richard Watterson can take anything. Is this conscious strategy? Almost certainly not. Richard does not sit down and calculate how to protect his children from their mother's rage. But he does it consistently across dozens of episodes. Whenever Nicole is building toward an explosion, Richard does something idiotic that draws her attention. Whenever the children are in danger of pushing too far, Richard pushes further. He is always the one who breaks first, who fails most spectacularly, who provides the pressure release valve that prevents the family from reaching genuinely destructive levels of conflict. Nicole asks Richard to step up as a father and set a good example for the children. He interprets this as an instruction to take the children shoplifting. This interpretation is wrong in every possible way. It is also the perfect distraction, because now Nicole is dealing with Richard's misunderstanding instead of the children's defiance. The original conflict evaporates. The children are forgotten. Richard has, through spectacular incompetence, resolved a family crisis by creating a bigger, funnier, less dangerous crisis that he can absorb on their behalf. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show's treatment of Richard's marriage to Nicole is one of the most nuanced and psychologically honest depictions of a long-term relationship in animated television. It would be easy to reduce their dynamic to a simple formula. Nicole is the competent one. Richard is the burden. She works. He does not. She achieves. He does not. She provides. He consumes. The show acknowledges this reading. It is the reading that most characters within the show accept. It is the reading that Nicole herself sometimes voices in moments of frustration. But the show also, quietly and consistently, undermines it. Because for all of Nicole's competence, for all of her strength and determination and frightening capability, she is not happy. Not when she is alone. Not when she is working. Not when she is winning. Nicole Watterson is a woman running on fumes, driven by a need to prove herself that was installed in childhood by parents who told her she was not enough. She is anxious. She is angry. She is exhausted. She is, in many episodes, on the verge of a breakdown that only the presence of her family prevents. And who is at the center of that family? Who is the person who has been standing next to her, unshaken and undemanding, for their entire adult lives? Richard, the man who saw her in a park when she was a frightened girl and told her she was already enough. The man who has never asked her to be less fierce or more gentle, or anything other than exactly what she is. The man who absorbs her rage without resentment, who survives her disappointment without bitterness, who remains steady and available through every crisis she creates or encounters. In The Choices, the episode rates 9.8 on IMDb for a reason. It is because it tells the truth about love that most shows are afraid to tell. That the right partner is not the one who makes your life easy. It is the one who makes your life possible. Richard does not make Nicole's life easy. He makes it harder in 100 measurable ways. But he also makes it possible, because without him, without his warmth, and his patience, and his ridiculous, unwavering belief that everything is going to be fine, Nicole would burn herself out. She would achieve more. She would earn more. She would impress more people. And she would be alone. Because no one who meets Nicole Watterson at full intensity can survive it for long. Except Richard. Richard survives it. He has survived it for decades. And that survival is not passive endurance. It is active love. It is the choice, made every single day, to stand next to the hurricane instead of running from it. The show underlines this in 100 small moments. The way Richard reaches for Nicole's hand when she is stressed. The way he falls asleep next to her every night without fail. The way he never, in 6 seasons and 240 episodes, threatens to leave. Not when she yells at him. Not when she humiliates him. Not when the weight of her expectations crushes everything in its path. He stays. And he stays not because he is too stupid to know he could leave, but because he is too devoted to imagine wanting to. Nicole's parents, as revealed in The Parents and other episodes, disapproved of Richard. They saw what everyone sees. An unemployed, overweight, seemingly useless man who would never give their daughter the life she deserved. And they were right, in every way that does not matter. Richard could never give Nicole money, or status, or professional pride. But he could give her the one thing her parents never did: unconditional acceptance. The feeling of being loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. And that gift, that deceptively simple, impossibly rare gift, is the thing that holds the Watterson family together through every crisis, every disaster, every failed scheme, and demolished household, an apocalyptic Thursday. There is an argument that the smartest thing Richard Watterson ever did was love Nicole. Not because it was strategic, not because he saw an opportunity, but because he recognized, at the age of 8 or 10 or whenever they met in that park, that this angry, brilliant, terrifying girl was the person who needed him most. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And the evidence is not in a single episode. It is in all of them. In the fact that Nicole chose him. In the fact that she keeps choosing him. In the fact that when the universe offers her every other option, she reaches for the hand of the man who is stuck in a log. The Money, the season 3 finale, offers one of the show's most inventive explorations of the Watterson family's poverty and, by extension, Richard's role in it. When the family runs out of money completely, the show itself begins to disintegrate. Characters lose their animation. Colors drain away. The world becomes sketchy and incomplete. The meta-commentary is sharp. Without money, there is no show. Without a budget, there are no characters. Without resources, nothing exists. The Wattersons are offered a deal. A commercial for Joyful Burger. Sell out and the money comes back. The animation improves. The world stabilizes. Gumball resists. He does not want to compromise his integrity for a fast food chain. But one by one, the family gives in. They sign the contract. They film the commercial. They sell out. And the world comes back. Richard's role in this decision is characteristically simple. He is hungry. He is always hungry. Food motivates him the way nothing else does. But the episode also shows something quieter. Richard is not conflicted about selling out because Richard was never invested in the concept of selling out to begin with. He does not have a self-image that depends on artistic integrity or anti-commercial principles. He does not define himself by what he refuses to do. He does not carry the weight of identity that burdens so many of the show's other characters. Gumball is defined by his desire to be cool. Darwin is defined by his need to belong. Anais is defined by her need to be the smartest. Nicole is defined by her need to be enough. Each of them carries a narrative about who they should be, and that narrative creates friction with who they actually are. Richard carries no such narrative. He has no aspirations that conflict with his reality. He has no self-image that his actual self fails to match. He is, perhaps uniquely in the entire cast of the amazing world of Gumball, a person who is exactly who he thinks he is. Not because he has achieved self-actualization through hard work and therapy, because he has never bothered to construct a false self in the first place. The gap between who Richard is and who Richard presents to the world is zero. And in a show obsessed with the gap between appearance and reality, between what things seem to be and what they actually are, Richard's total lack of pretense is practically revolutionary. He defines himself by who he loves and what makes them comfortable. If filming a commercial keeps the lights on and the family together, then filming a commercial is the right thing to do. No hand-wringing, no existential crisis, just a practical decision made by a man whose priorities are clear. This is what philosophers would call the clarity of simple values. Richard does not wrestle with complex ethical frameworks because his ethical framework is not complex. Take care of the family, eat when you are hungry, sleep when you are tired, be there for the people who need you. When decisions are filtered through this framework, they become obvious, not always correct, not always optimal, but always clear. And in a world as chaotic as Elmore, clarity is its own form of genius. The Possession, a season 6 episode, takes the audience deeper into the Watterson household's history than almost any other installment. The episode centers on the family's refrigerator and, through it, on the memories and emotions that have accumulated in the Watterson home over the years. It provides glimpses of young adult Richard and Nicole in their first apartment, a tiny space next to a train station where they lived before Gumball was born. These flashbacks are brief but revealing. Young Richard is recognizably Richard. The same open face, the same guileless smile, the same complete absence of pretension. But there is also something else visible in these early scenes. A contentment that is almost radical. Here is a man living in a cramped apartment with no money and no prospects, and he is happy, genuinely, visibly, unmistakably happy, because he is with Nicole, because they are together, because the fundamental conditions of his happiness, proximity to the person he loves, have been met, and everything else is details. The episode also reveals that Granny JoJo gave Nicole and Richard the old family refrigerator when they moved into their apartment, and that this was her way of getting Richard to leave her house. The implication is clear. Richard would have stayed with his mother forever if not given a reason to leave, and the reason was Nicole. Nicole was the force that pulled Richard out of his childhood, out of his mother's suffocating protection, and into an adult life. Without her, he would still be in that house, still wrapped in Granny JoJo's safety equipment, still treated as a child. Nicole freed him, and in return, he freed her. From her parents' expectations, from her need to prove herself, from the loneliness of being the strongest person in every room. That is a partnership, not the kind that looks impressive on paper, not the kind that wins awards or generates social media content, the kind that actually works, the kind that lasts, the kind that survives decades of financial hardship, 3 children, and the daily reality of living in a town where the ground can open up beneath your feet at any moment. Richard and Nicole Watterson have have the strongest marriage in Elmore, not because it is the happiest or the most balanced, because it is the most resilient. And resilience, in a world this chaotic, is the only metric that matters. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. One of the most underappreciated aspects of Richard's character is his relationship with his children as individuals, rather than as a collective. The show gives each Watterson child a distinct dynamic with their father. And in each case, Richard's behavior reveals a sensitivity to their specific needs that contradicts his reputation for obliviousness. With Gumball, Richard is a mirror. They share the same impulsive nature, the same appetite for chaos, the same inability to think before acting. But where Gumball is anxious about his inadequacies, constantly comparing himself to others, and finding himself wanting, Richard is at peace with his own failures. This difference is instructive. Gumball sees a version of himself in his father, a version that has given up the fight for respectability, and he is both comforted and horrified by it. Richard, whether consciously or not, provides Gumball with living proof that you can be a failure by every conventional metric and still be loved. That is a lesson no teacher at Elmore Junior High has ever taught, and it is arguably the most important one Gumball will ever learn. With Darwin, Richard provides something entirely different. Darwin is adopted. He is a fish who grew legs and became part of the family. His existence is, by any rational standard, impossible, and Richard does not care. He does not treat Darwin as strange or different or less than. He treats Darwin as his son, fully, without hesitation, without qualification. In a show that constantly plays with the absurdity of its own premise, Richard's complete, unreserved acceptance of Darwin is one of its most quietly radical statements. He does not need to understand how Darwin exists. He does not need an explanation. Darwin is his son. That is enough. And Darwin, who is perpetually anxious about belonging, about being enough, about deserving his place in the family, gets something from Richard that he cannot get from anyone else. The assurance that his existence does not require justification. With Aeneas, the dynamic is different again. Aeneas is a genius. At 4 years old, she is the smartest person in the family, and possibly the smartest person in Elmore. She knows this. The family knows this. And the knowledge creates a distance between Aeneas and her father that neither of them fully understands. Aeneas loves Richard, but she cannot respect his intelligence. And Richard loves Aeneas, but he cannot match her intellect. They exist in different cognitive worlds. But here is what the show does with this gap. It does not resolve it. It does not have Richard suddenly become smart enough to connect with Aeneas on her level. Instead, it shows that Richard connects with Aeneas on his level, through play, through silliness, through the kind of nonsensical, illogical, gloriously stupid interaction that Aeneas, the genius, cannot get from anyone else. Aeneas spends her entire life being the smartest person in the room. That is exhausting. It is lonely. It means she is always the one who has to be right, always the one who has to explain, always the one carrying the weight of understanding. Richard takes that weight off. When Aeneas is with Richard, she does not have to be smart. She just has to be his daughter. And that freedom, the freedom to be stupid and silly and childish with a parent who will never judge you for it, is a gift that only Richard can give her. The show also uses Richard to explore themes of masculinity that are subtle enough to miss, but present enough to matter. Richard does not perform masculinity in any traditional sense. He does not provide. He does not protect through strength. He does not lead. He does not compete. He does not suppress his emotions. He cries freely and often. He is afraid of things and admits it. He is physically soft and makes no effort to change that. He is, by every traditional measure of manhood, a failure. And the show frames this failure as liberation. Richard is free in a way that few male characters in animated television are allowed to be. He is free from the expectation of strength, free from the demand for competence, free from the pressure to earn and achieve and accumulate. He exists outside the framework that measures men by what they produce. And because he exists outside it, he is available for things that men inside the framework cannot access. Tenderness, vulnerability, presence, the simple, unprofitable act of sitting on the floor and playing with your children. The show never makes this point explicitly. There is no episode where Richard gives a speech about toxic masculinity or the burden of traditional gender roles, but the point is made through accumulation. Episode after episode, season after season, the show presents a man who does not conform to any standard of masculine success and who is, despite this, deeply loved and fundamentally necessary. The message is not that Richard is better than other fathers. It is that fatherhood does not require the things we are told it requires. It does not require money or strength or ambition or control. It requires love. And love, as Richard Watterson demonstrates in every episode he appears in, is the one resource he has in unlimited supply. The Downer, Season 3, Episode 37, is technically a Gumball episode. It follows Gumball through a day where he is in an inexplicably terrible mood and wishes his family would disappear. They do. The entire town empties out. Gumball wanders through a deserted Elmore, encountering a creeping darkness that eventually swallows everything. It is one of the show's most unsettling episodes, a genuine exploration of depression, filtered through the lens of a cartoon. But there is a moment at the beginning that belongs to Richard. When the family tries to cheer Gumball up, they gather outside his door. They bang on it. They shout. They do everything families do when one of their members is withdrawing. And Richard is there, banging on the door alongside everyone else. Not because he has a plan for fixing Gumball's mood. Not because he has insight into adolescent psychology. But because his son is hurting, and Richard cannot not be there. The pull toward his children is gravitational. It does not require understanding. It does not require skill. It is just there, constant and inescapable, the most fundamental fact of Richard Watterson's existence. And when Gumball yells at them to go away, when the family disappears and the world empties out, the absence of Richard's presence is one of the things that makes the emptiness unbearable. Gumball discovers, in the echoing silence of a Elmore without people, that the thing he wanted, solitude and silence and freedom from his annoying family, is actually the worst thing he can imagine. And when the episode reveals that it was all in his head, that his family was there the whole time, that Richard was standing right beside him, even when Gumball could not see him, the relief is physical. Richard was never gone. He was always there, even when his son was too lost in his own darkness to notice. That is the show's thesis about Richard Watterson, stated not through dialogue, but through structure. He is always there. He is always present. He is the ground beneath the family's feet, so constant and so taken for granted that his existence only becomes visible when you imagine it gone. And the moment you imagine it gone, you realize how much of your world was built on it. The later seasons of the show deepen Richard's character by placing him in increasingly complex situations and watching how he responds. By season 6, The Amazing World of Gumball has evolved into one of the most ambitious animated comedies ever produced, blending meta-commentary, existential horror, emotional drama, and absurdist humor into a mixture that should not work, but does. And Richard evolves with it. He is still funny. He is still absurd. But the absurdity contains more weight now, more meaning, more evidence of a character who has been built with care and purpose across nearly a decade of storytelling. The Intelligence, Season 6, Episode 19, deals with the concept of intelligence itself, though not through Richard directly. The Internet, a recurring character in the show, gains human-level intelligence and immediately becomes dysfunctional, picking up human flaws like jealousy and insecurity. The episode is a satire about the assumption that more intelligence equals better outcomes. And while Richard is not the focus, the episode resonates with everything the show has been saying about him for 6 seasons. Intelligence, stripped of wisdom and emotional health, is destructive. The internet becomes smarter and immediately becomes worse. Richard remains exactly as intelligent as he has always been, and remains exactly as loving. The comparison is deliberate. The show has spent 6 seasons building a case that traditional metrics of intelligence miss something essential. That the ability to process information rapidly, to solve complex problems, to accumulate knowledge, these are valuable skills, but they are not the whole picture. The whole picture includes the ability to love without conditions, the ability to persist without reward, the ability to be present without distraction. And by those measures, Richard Watterson is the smartest character in the entire show. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is one more dimension of Richard's genius that needs to be addressed, and it is perhaps the most important one. Richard Watterson understands time. Not in a scientific way, in a human way. He understands that time spent with the people you love is the only resource that matters, and he has structured his entire existence around maximizing it. Think about what a stay-at-home parent actually does. Not in theory, in practice. They are present. They are available. They are the person who is always there when the children come home from school. They are the person who knows the daily rhythms, the small dramas, the quiet moments that employed parents inevitably miss. They are the person who absorbs the 1,000 tiny interactions that make up a childhood. Richard Watterson has been there for every single one of those moments. Not because he is trapped, not because he has no options, but because some part of him, buried beneath the laziness and the incompetence and the apparent obliviousness, understands that presence is the most valuable thing a parent can offer. In The Choices, Nicole explores timelines where she chose differently. In many of those timelines, she is wealthier, more successful, more respected, but in none of them is she as loved. Because in none of them did she marry the man who would be there every morning, every afternoon, every evening, without fail, without ambition pulling him away, without career stress making him unavailable, without anything at all pulling him anywhere except toward his family. That is not laziness. That is a form of commitment so total that it looks like inaction. Richard Watterson does not leave the house because everything he cares about is inside it. He does not pursue a career because his career is being a father. He does not achieve great things because his greatest achievement is being present. And you cannot put that on a resume or a refrigerator chart or an Instagram post. The show understands this. It has always understood this. From the very first episode to the very last, it has been telling you that Richard Watterson is exactly where he needs to be, doing exactly what he needs to do. And it tells you this not through grand declarations, but through the accumulated weight of 6 seasons of evidence. Season 1 establishes the pattern. Season 2 complicates it. Season 3 starts to reveal the depth underneath the comedy. Season 4 takes risks with the character, placing him in situations that demand more than slapstick, and delivering more than anyone expected. Season 5, with episodes like The Choices and The Deal and The Diet, treats Richard with a level of empathy and understanding that elevates him from a cartoon father into something approaching a genuine character study. And Season 6 carries the weight of everything that came before, giving Richard moments that land differently because you have spent years watching him, years accumulating evidence, years building a picture that the show never drew explicitly, but always gave you the pieces to assemble. The Genius, Season 1, Episode 24, is an episode that seems at first to have nothing to do with Richard's intelligence. Darwin scores a perfect mark on an aptitude test and is taken away to a school for gifted children. The family is devastated. Gumball tries to become smart enough to join Darwin. Nicole and Richard grieve in their own ways. And eventually, the truth comes out. Darwin did not score perfectly on the test. Aeneas filled out his paper. The entire crisis was based on a mistake. But watch Richard during this episode. Watch his reaction to losing Darwin. He does not process it intellectually. He does not weigh the pros and cons of Darwin attending a gifted school. He does not consider the educational opportunities. He collapses. Emotionally. Completely. He dresses up a stranger in Darwin's clothes and tries to treat him as a replacement. He cannot function without his son. He cannot pretend. He cannot cope. And the rawness of his grief, the totality of his inability to manage the loss, is the most honest depiction of parental love in the entire first season. Because that is what Richard's genius ultimately is. It is the genius of not pretending, of refusing to moderate his emotions for the sake of social acceptability, of loving so completely and so openly that the loss of any member of his family does not just hurt him, it destroys him. Most parents love their children this deeply. Very few allow themselves to show it this completely. Richard cannot help it. He has no filter. He has no ability to present a calm face while crumbling inside. What he feels, everyone sees. And what he feels, always, is love. Overwhelming, impractical, inconvenient, embarrassing love that fills every room and makes every goodbye a tragedy and every reunion a celebration. That is not a weakness. That is the purest expression of what it means to care about another person. And the fact that Richard expresses it so freely, so unguardedly, so without any concern for how it makes him look, is what makes him extraordinary. Not extraordinary in the way that the world measures extraordinariness. Extraordinary in the way that matters. Extraordinary in the way that his family needs. Dan Russell, the voice actor who brings Richard to life, deserves recognition for the way he performs this emotional transparency. Russell is a British actor whose credits include Thomas and Friends and other animated programs. But his work as Richard Watterson is the defining performance of his career. He finds exactly the right frequency for Richard's voice. Warm, but not saccharine. Childlike, but not infantile. Vulnerable, but not pathetic. There is a genuine innocence in Russell's delivery that makes Richard's emotional openness feel natural rather than performed. When Richard is happy, you hear it in every syllable. When Richard is hurt, the pain is unmistakable. Russell never plays Richard as a caricature. He plays him as a person, a deeply flawed, profoundly limited, endlessly loving person whose voice carries the full weight of every emotion he feels. The voice is important because this is a sleep content video. The listeners will hear Richard's story unfold in a warm, measured cadence. And part of what makes Richard's story so suited to this format is its emotional consistency. There are no sharp turns, no sudden betrayals, no dark revelations that demand alertness. Richard's story is, fundamentally, a story about a man who loves his family. It goes to unexpected places. It reveals hidden depths, but it always returns to the same center: love, presence, persistence. These are not just themes, they are rhythms. They are the heartbeat of the character, and they produce a narrative that is, like Richard himself, deeply calming to be around. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The comedy comes from the gap between what that looks like from the outside and what it means from the inside. From the outside, it looks like a fat rabbit sleeping on a couch. From the inside, it is a man holding his family together through the simple, unglamorous, endlessly difficult act of being there. There is something that happens in the Watterson household that the show depicts so frequently and so casually that it becomes invisible. Richard feeds his family, not well, not nutritiously, not in any way that a cookbook or a dietitian would endorse, but he feeds them. He is in the kitchen. He is at the stove. He is opening packages and mixing ingredients and producing meals that are, by any objective standard, terrible. But they are meals, and they are produced by a man who is supposedly incapable of basic tasks. The show treats Richard's cooking as a running joke. His food is inedible. His combinations are grotesque. His kitchen hygiene is non-existent. But the act itself, the act of preparing food for other people, is an act of care. Every plate Richard puts on the table, no matter how disgusting its contents, is a statement. I am here. I am providing. I am doing the work of keeping you alive. The quality is abysmal. The consistency is remarkable. Richard cooks every day. He has cooked every day for the entire run of the series. He has never once refused. He has never once said it was someone else's turn. He has never once used his incompetent tense as an excuse to stop trying. That persistence, applied to something as mundane as daily meal preparation, is the most Richard Watterson thing imaginable. He is terrible at it, and he does it anyway. He does it because it needs to be done. He does it because it is part of being a father, and a husband, and a member of a household. And he does it without expecting gratitude or recognition or any reward beyond the knowledge that his family has been fed. The bar is low. The commitment is total. And the gap between the quality of the effort and the quality of the result is, perhaps, the most human thing about Richard Watterson. He cares more than he is capable. He tries harder than he succeeds. And he keeps trying anyway, every single day, because that is what love looks like when it does not have talent on its side. The Safety, Season 3, Episode 32, which aired on February 5th, 2015, places Richard in an action sequence that reveals his capacity for physical improvisation under pressure. Darwin, after watching a graphic safety video, becomes a totalitarian safety enforcer, gradually taking over Elmore and stripping away every citizen's freedom in the name of preventing harm. The Wattersons stage a mission to infiltrate Darwin's headquarters and free the town. Richard's role in the plan is to create a diversion. He disguises himself as a woman, an act the show notes he has performed multiple times across the series. He approaches the guard at the entrance and takes him out. The disguise works. The diversion succeeds. The plan moves forward because Richard, the least capable member of the family in every conventional sense, executed his portion flawlessly. This is a detail that slides past lost in the rush of the episode's action, but it is worth pausing on. Richard can disguise himself effectively. He can maintain a persona under pressure. He can incapacitate an opponent. He can follow a coordinated plan and execute his role within it. These are not the skills of a stupid person. They are the skills of someone who has been criminally underestimated, whose actual capabilities surface only when the situation demands them, and then vanish again behind the mask of incompetence as soon as the crisis passes. The Limit provides another example of this hidden competence. Nicole's transformation in the supermarket, her loss of control, her physical explosion of frustration, is one of the most frightening sequences in the entire series. The other characters flee, the children hide, the store descends into chaos, and through it all, Richard navigates. He does not freeze. He does not collapse. He moves through the environment with a physicality that suggests he has been in dangerous situations before and has, through sheer repetition, developed an instinct for survival that bypasses his conscious mind entirely. This instinct manifests in small ways throughout the series. Richard knows when to duck. He knows when to run. He knows when to stay perfectly still. He does not know that he knows these things, which is part of what makes them so fascinating. His body has learned lessons that his brain has not registered. He has been married to Nicole Watterson long enough that his reflexes have adapted to life, with a woman who can punch through walls when angry. He has lived in Elmore long enough that his physical responses have calibrated to a world where anything can happen at any moment. His clumsiness is real, but it coexists with a survival instinct that is equally real, and the combination produces a person who stumbles through danger with a success rate that defies explanation. The show ran for 8 years, and in those 8 years, it never once let Richard grow in the way that television usually allows characters to grow. He does not become smarter. He does not become thinner. He does not get a job. He does not overcome his fears. He does not reconcile with his father in any permanent, resolved way. He remains, from the first episode to the last, fundamentally the same person. And that is one final stroke of genius, not on Richard's part, but on the part of the writers who created him. Because Richard's consistency is the point. In a show where everything changes, where animation styles shift and meta-narratives collapse, and the fourth wall shatters on a weekly basis, Richard is the constant. He is the same in Season 6 as he was in Season 1. The same smile, the same warmth, the same spectacular incompetent tones, paired with bottomless love. The same man who was stuck in a log as a child and needed help getting out. The same man who looked at a frightened girl and told her she was already enough. The same man who would spend the next 30 years proving, through action rather than words, that he meant every syllable of that first, impossibly wise piece of advice. He does not need to grow because he was already complete. Not perfect, complete. A fully realized human being who knows what he values and lives in alignment with those values every single day. The way the show handles Richard in its final season is worth examining, because it demonstrates a creative team that understood exactly what they had built over the preceding 5 seasons. Season 6, which aired from January 2018 to June 2019, contains 44 episodes. It is the longest season of the series. And throughout it, Richard is treated with a quiet respect that feels earned rather than imposed. The father, as discussed earlier, is the crown jewel of Richard's Season 6 arc. But there are smaller moments throughout the final season that contribute to the portrait. Moments where Richard says something unexpectedly perceptive, and the other characters pause, briefly startled, before the show moves on. Moments where his physical presence in a scene, his solid, reassuring bulk, provides a counterweight to the increasingly surreal and destabilizing events that characterize the series' final episodes. Moments where his silence speaks louder than any dialogue could. The show's finale, The Inquisition, aired on June 24th, 2019. It is a dark, unsettling episode that upends many of the series' conventions. Characters are transformed. The rules of the world are challenged. The tone shifts towards something closer to genuine threat than the show has ever attempted. And in the midst of this upheaval, Richard remains Richard. He does not suddenly become competent. He does not suddenly become the hero. He remains exactly who he has always been. And his consistency, in an episode where everything else is changing, is itself a form of heroism. Because that is the final lesson of Richard Watterson. In a world that demands constant adaptation, constant improvement, constant evolution, the most radical thing you can do is refuse. Not out of laziness, though it looks like laziness. Not out of stupidity, though it looks like stupidity. But out of a certainty so deep, It does not need to be articulated. A certainty that the person you are is the person your family needs, and that the world's opinion on the matter is not relevant. The show, created by Ben Bacalé, was made in Cartoon Network's studio in London. It took approximately 1 year to produce each episode, with roughly 26 episodes being worked on simultaneously. The creative team drew from live action, stop motion, traditional animation, CGI, and mixed media to create a visual language that was unlike anything else on television. They built a world that was simultaneously absurd and emotionally real, populated by characters who were both cartoons and people. And at the center of that world, unchanged from the pilot to the finale, was a large pink rabbit who loved his family more than he loved anything else in the universe. That is the rarest thing in storytelling. Not a character who changes. A character who does not need to. A character who arrives in the first frame as exactly who he is, and remains exactly who he is for 240 episodes, without ever becoming boring or predictable or stale. Because Richard is not static. He is stable. Those are different things. Static means nothing is happening. Stable means everything is happening, and the center is holding. Richard Watterson is the center that holds the Watterson family together. And across 6 seasons and 8 years, and one of the most creatively ambitious animated shows ever produced, that center never wavered. The Amazing World of Gumball aired for 8 years, 240 episodes, 6 seasons. It was created by Ben Bacalé, who named the Watterson family after Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes. It was voiced by a rotating cast that included Logan Grove, Kwesi Boki, Terrell Ransom Jr., Jacob Hopkins, and Nicholas Cantu as Gumball, and Dan Russell as Richard throughout the entire run. It won a BAFTA. It was nominated for Annie Awards. It became one of Cartoon Network's most beloved and critically acclaimed series. And at the center of all of it was Richard Watterson, the character who was supposed to be the joke, the bumbling father, the lovable idiot, the one everyone laughed at and no one took seriously. But across those 240 episodes, if you pay attention, if you look past the slapstick and the absurdity and the endless parade of failures, you see something else. You see a man who speaks fluent Spanish and no one knows why. You see a man who can outmaneuver his entire family when the television remote is at stake. You see a man who turns an errand for mayonnaise into an epic quest and completes it without anyone noticing. You see a man who stops a speeding car with one hand when his wife's life is in danger. You see a man who invents a holiday to make January bearable. You see a man who plays pretend with such commitment that his children forget they were fighting. You see a man whose face, showing nothing but trust and love, can make a lifelong con artist choose honesty for the first time. You see a man who buys a star because his son deserves one. You see a man who was raised to be afraid, who was abandoned by his father, who was sheltered into helplessness by his mother, who was given every reason to be bitter and broken and closed off, and who chose instead to be open, to be warm, to be present, to be ridiculous and vulnerable and endlessly, stubbornly, irrationally devoted to the people who need him. The Amazing World of Gumball ran from 2011 to 2019. In that time, it told a lot of stories about Richard Watterson. Some were funny, some were sad, some were both at once. But all of them, every single one, were about the same thing. A man who was smarter than he looked, braver than he knew, and more necessary than anyone, including himself, ever realized. That is not a character study. That is a love letter. Written by a show that understood, better than most, that genius comes in forms that do not fit on a test. That the smartest person in the room might be the one who never speaks. That the greatest act of intelligence is not solving a problem, but choosing which problems to care about. And that sometimes the most brilliant thing a person can do is sit on a couch, eat a sausage, and be there when their family comes home. Richard Watterson was always a genius. The show just trusted you to figure that out on your own. And if you have been listening to this essay while drifting off to sleep, if the rhythm of these words has carried you somewhere between waking and dreaming, consider this. The feeling of safety that allows you to close your eyes and let go is the same feeling that Richard Watterson gives his family. Not through strength, not through competence, not through any quality that the world rewards or respects. Through presence, through the simple, radical, endlessly underestimated act of being there. Being there when someone needs you. Being there when no one does. Being there in the morning and the evening, in the long, uneventful afternoons where nothing happens except the quiet accumulation of love. That is genius. Not the kind you study, the kind you live. And Richard Watterson has been living it for 6 seasons. 240 episodes, and every moment in between. So let that sit with you as the screen fades. Let it settle. The laziest man in Elmore is also the wisest. The biggest failure is also the greatest success. And the character who was supposed to be the joke turned out to be the point. The show knew it all along. Now you do too. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.